Yes, Mr. Pretorius.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Agrizzi, may I ask you to go back very briefly to paragraph 41.3?
Yes, sir.
What were the arrangements made for the purchase of the handbag referred to here that, according to your evidence, was given to Ms. Mieni?
If I remember correctly, my wife actually phoned up a lady. I can find out who the lady was, and she mentioned that another lady would be coming to pick it up.
All right, so your Gavin Watson asked you for advice.
Yes,
He or you asked for your wife's advice.
that's correct.
Your wife suggested the purchase of a handbag,
That's correct.
and it was your wife, do I understand your evidence now, that arranged for the purchase of a Louis Vuitton handbag?
My wife placed the order. She sent some pictures that she got from the lady at Louis Vuitton, and based on that, she said, this is the brand number, this is the model number, and another lady went in to go and pay for the bag and pick up the bag and deliver it to Mr. Watson.
Thank you. Can we then go, please, to paragraph 41.11? You say that one afternoon you received a request or an instruction from Gavin Watson.
That's correct, sir.
Would you detail that, please?
One afternoon, Chair, I can't remember the exact date, but Gavin Watson asked me to attend a meeting with him, with Mrs. Mieni. He told me that she had very important documentation to actually show us, and it was critical that I be at that meeting. I remember it vividly because I had a meeting scheduled with a client, and I had to cancel that meeting with a client, and I needed to rush through with him. And what happened was we drove together. We actually drove in his car, and when we got there, we were escorted up to a certain floor.
All right. Before you go to the physical movements that you're describing, did Mr. Watson tell you anything of what he had apparently learnt from Ms. Mieni?
Well, he said that what he said to me was he had learned some information had come through to her from the NPA.
All right. You say you travelled in the same car as Mr. Watson, with him, obviously. Were any preparations made for the meeting?
Yes, money was prepared.
How much?
It was 300,000 rand.
In cash?
That's correct.
Where did you go with Mr. Watson then?
We went to the Sheraton Hotel in Pretoria, opposite the Union Buildings. I think that's the only one there is in Pretoria.
Right. And when you arrived at the hotel, where did you go?
When we arrived at the hotel, Chair, we were escorted up to I think it was the 5th or the 6th floor of the Sheraton Hotel. It's like a lounge area for VIP guests.
Can you recall which floor? May become important.
Chair, I think it was the 6th floor. I can explain it to you. You walk in through you come out of the elevators, and there's a concierge desk in front of you. It's very well fitted out and that. We turned left, and she was sitting in the corner on a couch, and we went to her there and sat there. It was a private corner with glass all around it that we could see.
Right. Who attended the meeting that ensued?
Well, The meeting that was attended was with Gavin Watson and myself and Dudumieni.
Did she give you any information at that stage or at the commencement of the meeting?
Yes. She explained to us that she had meetings at the NPA, and they were long, tedious meetings, she told us. And she said that they were working on closing down and shutting down the case. And she said, but I want you to look at the docket. And she gave me the docket, and she said, all right, fine. You can write down things, but please don't make copies or take photographs or anything like that.
What did she say the NPA said was closing down?
She was working on getting the Bosasa matter closed down.
Is that the investigation?
That's correct.
Okay.
She gave you certain documents.
That's correct.
Did she tell you what those documents were?
She said it was police case docket, and it looked like a police case docket. So, but what she did do was she took some notes out of it, which seemed separate. So she had the actual, it was a beige folder, but quite a thick folder, but she took some notes out of it and said, I must look at these notes.
Right. Did you respond?
Yes, I asked actually to be excused from there for two reasons. Number one, I needed some quiet around me to understand what was written down, and I wanted to rewrite the notes. But in the back of my mind, I knew that it was too extensive to write down everything, so I thought, well, you know, what harm is it going to do to take a few photographs?
Was Dudumieni's attitude in regard to the making of copies of those documents made clear to you?
Sorry, could you repeat that question to me, please?
Ms. Mieni,
Yes.
did she make clear to you her attitude as to whether you could or should make copies of the documents she was showing you?
No, she was very specific. She said that it's very, very secret, these documents, and nobody must know that she has shown them to me, and she didn't want me to make copies of it. I could write down, transcribe everything that was on it, but it was quite a lot of documents, and I didn't have the luxury of, time.
What did you then do?
Well, I wrote down quite a bit in the back of one of my journals on some specific aspects, but as time was running out, and I could see from where she was sitting and the reflection in the glass that she was very fidgety and very nervous. So I thought, let me rather make photographs of the documents, so that if she comes to take it away, at least I got something to work off.
How did you take photographs?
Yes, I did. I put the papers down and I took photographs from them.
When you say down, what do you mean?
I think it was on the floor on the couch, next to me, so I could get both hands to take the photograph.
Would you look at Annexure Y, which appears on page 710 of Bundle S2, please?
Could you repeat the page again, please?
Well, perhaps you should go to page 711. Page 711 appears to be a copy or photograph of a document. Is this the photograph that you took?
Is the photograph I took?
And it continues through to page 726. see that?
That is correct.
Obviously, from your evidence, you can't say precisely what documents these are. You can only say what they appear to you to be. Right?
They appear to be, a report progress on the investigation.
Right. The heading in the box at the top of page 711 reads Department of Correctional Services case docket with reference Pretoria Central CAS 1556/02/2010 was registered. The investigation was referred to the Anti-Corruption Task Team for further investigation. The heading above that reads ACTT, presumably Anti-Corruption Task Team, monthly progress and audit report.
Correct.
There is then a reference to offences under investigation, which appear to include fraud, corruption, money laundering and racketeering.
That's correct.
And then at the bottom of the page is a table which is headed Status of the Investigation.
That's correct.
This document appears to continue and on page 714 there is a table which shows various officials of law enforcement agencies that appear to be involved in the processes set out in this documentation.
That is correct.
I just want to draw your attention to one of those names, and that is NPA Prosecutor Advocate MC de Kock. We've heard about her earlier in your evidence.
That is correct.
And then on the next page, page 715, is another table and a list of names that appear under the heading suspect stroke withdrawn.
Correct.
I'm not sure what that means, but amongst the names there listed is your own name against the figure 3.
That is correct.
Other names mentioned are Mr. Gillingham, Mr. MT, Mr. Mansell, Dr. Smith, Andres van Tonda, Carlos Bonifacio, and Rian Hoeksma. It may be noted for present purposes that Mr. Watson's name doesn't appear here. Do you know why?
Chair, I think if you've got the right connections, you can get your name to disappear anywhere.
If you know why as a matter
No, I
of
don't.
fact.
Sorry. I don't.
The document continues, and we needn't go into much detail because the document will speak for itself, but I'd like to take you please to page 721. And 724. You see the background to the documents there, that dark background with a pattern on it.
Correct.
Perhaps you could go to page 725 where that background appears more extensively and clearly.
Correct.
Do you know what that background is?
It's the same pattern that's in the Sheraton Hotel on the floor.
A carpet pattern.
Correct.
And do you know whether the investigators have made their own investigations regarding that pattern and any links that that pattern might have to the carpet on the 6th floor of the Sheraton Hotel?
It matches. It's exactly the same pattern.
Yes, there will be independent evidence in that regard, Chair.
Okay, thank you. The picture in relation to, or that reflects the carpet there, Is there an existing picture that shows the true colors of the carpet? Or can it be done to show the true colors? Or are these the true colors of the carpet?
Chair, I would have to check with the investigators. I haven't been back to the Sheraton since.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Do you have the cell phone from which these pictures were taken?
Unfortunately, Chair, as I get an upgrade, I hand them out. And I can't remember who I gave that phone to, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I just want to add, Chair, if you look at, because...
Do you know whether it would have been family members or not really necessary?
Probably staff member, Chair, that I gave it to.
Okay.
If I can just add one thing, if you look at the metadata on the actual photograph, because it saves automatically to the iCloud account, the metadata gives the exact location where that photo was taken.
Okay, thank you.
Except as I understand it, you don't have the original photograph.
Not on my phone, no.
Right. And the set of documents which you say looked like a police docket, did you keep any documents or did you return them to Ms. Miani?
She was very specific that she asked me to return everything.
And did you do that?
Yes, I did.
Did you, however, keep the photograph on your cell phone, and were these eventually printed for the purposes of your own records?
That is correct.
What did you give to the investigators?
I gave the investigators the actual photographs that were taken. I emailed them to them.
Right. In print form?
In print, in raw form.
You kept what after the Sheraton meeting?
They kept the photographs.
You kept it on your cell phone?
Correct.
You then gave your cell phone away at some stage?
Correct.
Did you keep the documents, the printout of the photographs?
If I can explain, my phone automatically syncs with my computer. So all my photographs from day dot, when I started taking photographs, appear on my computer as well.
I understand. And you say that's where the metadata will also appear?
Correct.
Thank you.
So, you entered the room where Ms. Miani was on the 6th floor at the Sheraton Hotel, and you did so together with Mr. Gavin Watson. And she was sitting at a corner on the left-hand side of the room as you come out of the elevators. Is that right?
That is correct.
The two of you, that is yourself and Mr. Gavin Watson, joined her, and you sat at the table.
That is correct.
But when you wanted to look at the docket or file that she gave you, you moved to another spot within the same room?
It's a hall probably the size of this hall with subdivisions in it, Chair.
But where you were sitting, were you throughout within her sight?
Chair, I was just out of her sight, but I could see her in the reflection of the glass. Because the room is surrounded with glass.
Yes. Okay.
So I could see her.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you know whether the electronic record of the photographs on your computer would show the date on which the photographs were taken?
They would.
Do you know what those dates are? Can you remember?
Unfortunately, I didn't print it out, otherwise I can have it done.
Because the investigators have also done a separate investigation in relation to who stayed at the hotel over that period, and that evidence will be placed before you, Chair. It's in the affidavit of Mr. Dutton that I referred to in opening.
Thank you.
Did Mr. Watson make any request of Ms. Mieni at that meeting?
Most definitely. When I got back and I said I'd made notes to Mrs. Mieni, and we were sitting there with Mr. Watson, he said, please, this has to get shut down now. Has to be
Please
closed.
just repeat that. He said what?
He said this has to be shut down now. It has to be closed up.
Yes.
And she
This was
gave-
now back at Busasa, or on your way back,
No, while we were with Mrs. Mieni.
or when you got back to the table.
So I came back, she
Yeah.
asked me, did you take photos? I lied to her and I said, no, I didn't. I wasn't about to tell her I did. And then what happened was she turned around and Gavin started speaking to her and said, listen, this must get shut down now. All right.
Okay.
And I mean, Mr. Watson was well aware that I had taken photographs.
Oh, how was he aware if
I
Miss
told
Mieni
him-
wasn't aware?
I told him in the car on the way back.
Or he became aware after the meeting?
After the meeting, I explained to him why I did it.
Yeah, okay.
The request or demand that the matter be shut down was, it's rather obvious, a request to the contemplated criminal proceedings related to Bosasa and its officials.
That is correct, Chair.
And that request, it's reasonably clear from your evidence, was made to Ms. Mieni.
Specifically, Chair, it was asked that she goes to the President and gets it closed up immediately.
If we can move on then to,
Well, what was Miss Mieni's response to this request by Mr. Watson that the investigation or the matter should be shut down immediately?
Chair, she said she would work on it. I mean, that's what she said. I'll work on it.
Okay, thank you.
just a final question in relation to that evidence. In paragraph 41.13, you say you were interrupted. This was when you were taking photographs by Ms. Mieni, who seemed very nervous.
That's correct.
And it continues to say, I thought it best to appease her and return the docket to her.
I could see through I explained earlier, Chair, I could see from the reflection of the window, she kept looking in my direction. And that's why I thought, let me just get this docket back to her.
What was your purpose of taking these photos at that time?
Because, Chair, I couldn't, there was no ways I could write all that down in the space of 5 minutes.
Or it was just to obtain the information without having to write it all down? Okay.
Unfortunately, Chair, I do write slowly, so, and it's fountain pen, and it was a lot of information. You know, the first 3 pages that I copied, I mean, that took me the best part of nearly 10 minutes. The rest, I photostated, I quickly photographed because I didn't have time.
Okay, thank you.
Did you photograph all the documents that you were given, or some? What was the case?
Some I wrote out. The first batch that I got, because I worked from back to front, I think. The first batch that I wrote some notes down, I copied and made my own shorthand notes, and the rest I photographed. I might have missed 1 or 2.
Do you know whether Ms. Mieni was aware that you had taken photographs?
I do not think so. She would have confronted me.
Notwithstanding the fact that she interrupted you in that process or after that process?
Well, I wouldn't say she interrupted me. I watched her in the mirror and she was very nervous and fidgety. So because of that, the whole process was interrupted, and then that's why I say I returned the docket back to her.
So she didn't walk over to you and stop you
No,
doing what you were doing?
No, she was sitting with Gavin Watson.
If we can then go to paragraph 42, and there you deal with matters related to the former President Jacob Zuma. Do you know from your own knowledge or what you were told how Mr. Watson had been introduced to President Zuma?
If I can give you some background, Chair. One morning a lady appeared at one of those prayer meetings, and her name was Zuki, and she came in and she was introduced by Tandi Makoko to myself because she was very early, and later when Gavin Watson was there, she was introduced to Gavin Watson, and the next minute, later during the morning, I was asked to top up Tandi Makoko's credit card, and I'm just giving you an overview, it might not be my statement, but to top up a credit card because she wanted to go buy dresses for the lady. So I did it because I was asked to do it. So I allowed it and I processed it. And then later that afternoon, I got a phone call from Gavin Watson to say that I must pick him up at his house at, was about 5, 6 o'clock. And I had to take him through. But then later on I learned that this lady, Zuki Madonga, she was actually running a guest lodge of sorts in, I think it was East London, and she had a very good relationship with President Jacob Zuma. She had worked through him with the rape cases, and she was a prayer warrior for him, and she was open about it. And I then took Gavin Watson to the Forest Town house. I still remember how to get there, and it was on the left-hand side at a bend at the end. And I said to Gavin, well, you know, I'm going to sit in the car, I'm not coming out. Rather let me wait in the car, you have a one-on-one with him and deal with it. And
Whose house was that?
That was Jacob Zuma's house. I can explain the house to you as well.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that.
Well, when was that?
That was just when he was president of the ANC, but not president of the country yet.
Oh, okay. So it
Yeah.
would have been before May 2009.
Yeah, probably. But I remember it was that Monday or the Tuesday. It was a Tuesday evening.
Yeah.
Because that evening, it was just after I think it was Mangaung. Yeah. I don't follow politics at all, so.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Pretorius.
Then in paragraph 42.3, you talk about events relating to Ms. Mieni once more. Tell the chair about that, please.
What would happen is that if people were introduced to us and they were high profile, we would normally take them on a tour of the office park, which is a kind of a smokes and mirrors exercise where you show people what we're doing and speak to different staff and that type of thing. So normally a tour would take about 4.5 hours, and we'd show them absolutely everything, and staff, we had trained staff to give them a rendition of what they were doing and that type of thing, so they've been trained in it. So she came and visited the park. She was there, and you know, we had numerous people. I mean, from the Minister of Health to right the way through to President Jacob Zuma spent 4.5 hours with us on a Saturday morning.
Let's go on to paragraph 42.4.
So Dudu Mieni would have frequent meetings with a chap by the name of Trevor Matenjwa. He's a director, and he comes from the KZN area. He has a very good relationship with Ms.
Director at Busasa.
Correct. One of the subsidiaries, if I'm not mistaken, he sits on the main board, but he also sits as a MD for Sundola IT, what's now called GTS. So Trevor was responsible for handling Dudu Mieni. But one of the critical issues that Trevor needed to sort out was the NPA matter and the prosecutions matter of Bosasa. So that was given to Trevor as a task. Everybody knew that Trevor was the man who would deal with Dudu Myeni and the NPA issue. Often I'd be present at a meeting where this matter would be raised, and Trevor would be the one to have to deal with it and handle it with Dudu Myeni.
So, with regard to the Bosasa investigation, Bosasa had Mr. Watson and yourself on the one side dealing with Mr. Mti, who you told us would have interactions with the NPA or certain people at the NPA, but on the other there was also Mr. Trevor Matenjwa, who was dealing with the same issue but through Ms. Myeni.
Correct.
Okay.
Were you ever present at a meeting where the Bosasa prosecution or contemplated prosecution was discussed with Ms. Myeni?
I was at meetings where it was discussed, and this led to the reason why the involvement of the president directly needed to take place.
By this time, I take it from your evidence, President Zuma had been elected as president.
Correct.
Do you know whether Mr. Watson first dealt with Ms. Myeni before they dealt with the president or met the president, or whether they met the president or dealt with the president before Ms. Myeni came into the picture?
Chair, my understanding, and from what I can recollect, is that the first person to introduce Gavin Watson to the president was Zuki Madonga. And then, I mean, we got involved and we helped and we did a couple of things for a guest house, and then she kind of fell off the map. We didn't hear from her again. And then the second introduction was done by Dudu Myeni. So he had
Yes.
seen the president, not as the president, but as the president of the ANC
Yes.
previously.
And do you know how Bosasa or Mr. Gavin Watson came to meet with Ms. Myeni in the first place, how that happened, or how that relationship started?
Chair, as far as I recall, I think it was Trevor Matenjwa that introduced Dudu Myeni via a brother-in-law or something to Dudu Myeni.
Okay, thank you.
I can't remember all the detail.
Thank you.
You talk of a particular meeting in paragraph 42.5.
Yes.
Would you provide detail to the chair, please?
Chair, it was a meeting just after that expose on Kandla and the 250 million rand that was spent. And Gavin actually went down there and had a meeting with the president. And then the following Monday, we were in an open meeting. It was an exco meeting that I used to run in the office. And Gavin always liked to brag when he met politicians. He would always go out of his way to let everybody know that he saw the president. So that made him feel good and important. So I let him have his say in front of all the executives. And he basically told them that he'd been to Nkandla and was shocked because there's no ways that place cost 250 million. And I remember the comments still. He said the toilet seats were like they were built from Builders Warehouse, bought from Builders Warehouse.
Right.
So, and then, you know, so he commented on the shabby workmanship that took place there. You know, doors are falling off the hinges and there's broken things all
With
around.
respect, that's not an issue that concerns
I thought
us.
you wanted detail.
No, I want detail, please, of the content of the meeting.
So the meeting that Gavin Watson had with the President was specifically to discuss the shutting down of the NPA matter and the NPA case against Bosasa.
What did Gavin Watson say? He had said at that meeting.
Excuse me.
And before you do you say that, this was a different meeting from the one you told us about, where Mr. Governor Watson, you said, took some money to the former president with him. That's a separate
correct.
one. This one is a separate one.
This one is one of the first meetings
Okay,
after the Forest Town meeting.
okay.
Sorry,
Mr. Pretorius, I interrupted
What was said
you.
at that meeting by Mr. Watson to the former president?
well, what we were told was...
According to what Mr. Watson told you.
Well, he was with Joe Gumedi, so both of them were explaining it to us, and basically it instructed President Zuma at that stage to shut down the case with the Hawks against Bosasa. And he asked the President at that stage to call in Anwar Dramat, because Anwar Dramat was avoiding Nomvula Mokunyane at that stage. So he needed the President to actually make contact with him, call him in, and tell him to hand over and shut down.
Was there a later meeting between Mr. Watson and Mr. MT at which you were present?
That is correct.
Did this meeting to which you will now refer happen after the meeting with the former president?
That is correct.
What was said at this latter meeting?
At the latter meeting with Mr. MT, Gavin Watson basically said to him, he said, listen, the President's actually waiting for your person, Jiba, to shut down this case. She needs to do certain things. She needs to get hold of people. And basically Gavin said to him, listen, Jiba is the President's person, and he's waiting for her to actually make the first move on shutting down the case.
To whom did Gavin Watson say that?
He said that to Richmond MT because he wanted Richmond MT to speak to Jiba about it.
Right. Do you recall ever being present at a meeting when Mr. Watson spoke over the telephone to President Zuma?
Yes.
Who was at that meeting?
The meeting took place at T's house. It was about 10 o'clock in the morning, and I was present, and T was present, and Watson was present, and Watson was on the line to the President, and he actually handed over the phone to T and says, yeah, your boss wants to speak to you. And T took the phone and he spoke in Xhosa or Zulu, I'm not too sure. But then when he was about to finish, he said in English, because I was sitting there, I was listening, he said, I'm ready to be deployed. And that's when he gave the phone back to Gavin Watson.
Just to go back a moment, please, to paragraph 42.5, the second meeting referred to in that paragraph, where Gavin Watson said to Mr. MT, please tell Ms. Jiba that the President is waiting for her to make a move.
Yes,
It is the President that was waiting, is it?
that is correct.
Do you know what position Ms. Jiba held at that stage?
If I remember correctly, I think she was the acting NDPP. I'm not too sure. I stand to correction.
NDPP, you mean National Director of Public Prosecution?
Correct.
In relation to the meeting, the other meeting dealt with in that paragraph, you mentioned earlier on Ms. Nomvula Mokunyane's name, but I didn't understand precisely what you were saying about her. You said somebody was not taking her calls in connection with the shutting down of the investigation into Bosasa.
Well, I didn't add into my statement purely because it was oversight, but I recall clearly that there was a relationship between Anwar Dramat and Nomvula Mokunyane. And the request was that Nombula speaks to Anwar Dramat to close down on their side the investigation. And there was this whole debate between, is it with the Hawks, is it with or commercial crimes, is it with the NPA? Nobody really knew where it was at. And that's why it jogged my memory when I was giving you the background to it.
And who was said not to be taking Ms. Nomvula Mokonyane's calls?
I believe it was Anwar Dramat.
Oh, okay. Mr. Anwar Dramat, what was his position at that time in the Hawks?
I really don't know.
You don't know? Okay, all right.
If you just bear with me a moment. Not that he favored shutting down. In paragraph 42.7, you say that any requests, because you've given this evidence before, I'm going to lead, any request forwarded on behalf of President Zuma would be granted by Gavin Watson. Do you have an example of any such request?
I want a function for 250 people on Sunday morning for a birthday party.
Would the former president make that request to Mr. Gavin himself, or would that come through somebody else?
It would always come through Ms. Miani, most of the times.
Did Mr. Watson ever tell you of his own beliefs or attitude in regard to whether or not President Zuma would support or did support and protect him?
Yes, he told me in no uncertain terms. We used to have every morning meeting was plagued by renditions of what a brilliant president he was and how phenomenal he was. And he always praised him. So he had a very good rapport with him. He used to specifically say that he could sit across him in the table. He'd actually gesture by moving his chair and come and sit right in front of him. He says, I speak to him like this.
My question was somewhat different. Let me ask it again. Did Gavin Watson ever tell you what his belief was in regard to whether he had the support and protection of President Zuma? Support and protection.
Most definitely. He believed he was totally bulletproof.
Mr. Watson believed Mr. Watson, was bulletproof.
With Mr. Zuma there, yes.
I'm sorry?
With Mr. Zuma on his side, yes.
I understand. In the next paragraph, you deal with certain other evidence of yours. Kevin Wakeford, what was his relationship with Gavin Watson?
Well, they're long-standing friends of the Watsons.
Was there a stage at which Bosasa was being audited by the South African Revenue Services?
Most definitely. We were being constantly hounded. Every time there's a negative newspaper article, we would at that stage be audited, pulled in. I mean, even in our personal capacities, SARS used to come and do lifestyle audits on us, full audits, and really pester us.
Was Mr. Wakeford on occasion consulted by Gavin Watson in relation to negative press publicity and these SARS audits?
Yes, he was, and on certain occasions, he actually accompanied me to the bankers to try and explain the allegations away with the banks.
Right. And was he paid a fee for his services?
Yes, he was.
Did Mr. Wakeford approach Mr. Watson on one occasion whilst Bosasa was undergoing a major SARS investigation?
That is correct, Chair.
What did he tell Mr. Watson, and were you present at that meeting?
I was present at that meeting, Chair.
What was said?
Well, basically what was said is that we need to get George Papadakis on board, and that everything else we tried would be pointless. We need to get him on board and get him to help us in sorting out the SARS issue.
Right. Was Mr. Wakeford paid a fee for his services in relation to this particular investigation and SARS investigations in general?
Yes, he was paid a large sum of money every month. It was in the region of about 100,000 rand a month.
A fee
Correct, yes.
for services rendered.
That is correct.
Then go on, please, to deal with the allegation in paragraph 43.5. At that stage, Mr. Papadakis, do you know whether he was in any way related in a business sense to the South African Revenue Services?
Well, he was a consultant there, and that's why everybody thought it would be great to be able to use him to assist us.
Or simply approach him?
Sorry?
Simply approach him, say, we have this issue we wish to raise in relation to the investigation. You're employed by SARS, so we want to make representations to you.
Correct.
Carry on then, paragraph 43.5.
I wasn't privy to the meeting that was held, Chair, with Gavin Watson, Kevin Wakeford, and George Papadakis. All that we were told is that he's working in the background, he'll handle everything. And then we basically would get an order to say you need to deliver wet or dry cement.
Wet and dry, or wet or dry?
Wet and dry.
Right.
Cement to a certain property in Meyersdorp. But I think that Franz Foster will, or the next witness, will deal more thoroughly with that incident.
Do you know who owned that property in Meyersdorp?
It was owned by Mr. Papadakis.
Do you know whether cement deliveries were indeed made?
Most definitely.
And, Chair, there will be further evidence in relation to those transactions. Let's move on, please, to paragraph 44, where you talk of the Department of Home Affairs and certain renegotiations that took place in relation to the Lindela Repatriation Center.
That's correct.
You say you went at the meeting where Mr. Watson and Mr. Wakeford would have discussed matters relating to the investigation of SARS with Mr. Papadakis.
I can't recall being in the meeting with Mr. Papadakis and Mr. Wakeford and Mr. Watson.
So the evidence you can give, you already given.
Yes.
Let's go then to paragraph 44, the Lindela Repatriation Center.
Right.
You've told the Chair that that center was a facility owned by the Bosasa groups. You say here in the statement specifically by Bosasa Properties
That is
Pty
correct.
Limited.
That is correct, Chair.
And you've told the Chair that it's a facility for the detention and repatriation of migrants who enter the country without proper authority and documentation.
Correct.
The management of Lindela, under which department would that fall?
The management of the Lindela repatriation facility is done by Bosasa, but it falls under the Department of Home Affairs.
And the tender for the management of Lindela was granted, you say, by the Department of Home Affairs to a Bosasa company. What company was that?
It's called Leading Prospect Trading, which is one of the subsidiaries.
Is that Leading Prospect Trading 111?
That's correct.
So Pty Limited.
Correct.
Was there a time when that contract was under review
Yes,
at the instance of the Department of Home Affairs?
that is correct, Chair.
Was there a consultancy employed for that review?
Chair, the consultancy was Fever Tree Consultants, and they had subcontracted part of that to a gentleman by the name of Anil Radhakrishna from Akile.
Is that the same Anil Radhakrishna that you spoke of earlier?
That is correct.
Right. And the consultancy, Fever Tree, was appointed, you say, by the Department of Home Affairs.
That is correct, Chair.
What was the content of the review? In other words, what was done pursuant to the review? You referred to that in paragraph 44.2.
The minister at that stage was Nosvima Pisangakula, and she wanted to see, then that always was a hot potato in Parliament, and it'll always be raised as it's costing the taxpayers so much money. So she wanted to raise the issue with us, and she wanted the price reduced of Lindela itself.
And in particular, how would this reduction in cost be achieved?
What happened was we used to, at Lindela, get paid per person per day. So you were paid on occupancy rates. During the early 2000s, I negotiated a fixed fee rate because it's like a bus of school kids. You either have a full bus or an empty bus, but you still got to pay for the bus. So we negotiated a fixed fee contract where we didn't charge per occupancy, but we charged specifically for the a fixed fee. So they wanted this reduced because what was happening was where Lindela should be accommodating between 3,000 and 4,000 people, it was only accommodating 1,000, and the department would be charged the fixed fee rate, which was equivalent to 3,500 people. So in their opinion, it was wastage, and she wanted to reduce. So I then entered into discussions and negotiations with Fever Tree Consulting, who then appointed a consultant to work with us on it, to look at the reductions in it.
Who was that consultant?
The consultant that was eventually appointed was Anil Radhakrishna. And the reason why he was appointed was because Gavin Watson and Kevin Wakeford decided we could work with him. That was the first time I'd actually met Anil.
Was an agreement reached
Yes.
in relation to the request by the Department of Home Affairs to reduce costs?
Sorry, yes, an agreement was reached and we reduced the costs.
And was there any payment involved? Payment at the hands of Basasa?
The later stage, after they'd reduced the cost, and I remember it vividly, we reduced the cost by about 862,000 Rand per month. And my concern was that Anil Radhakrishna then approached me and said that him, Kevin Wakeford, and Gavin Watson had come up with a deal. So I said, look, I don't know about a deal, but let me find out, and if there's a deal, well, then there's a deal. But I wasn't involved with it. I was then informed that he was expecting a payment of 7 million Rand.
Informed by whom?
By Anil Radhakrishna.
That he, Radhakrishna, was expecting a payment
Exactly.
of 7 million Rand,
Exactly.
right?
And that was to facilitate the negotiation and the extension of the contract. So if I can explain to you, Chair, what actually happened was, it was a process where we reduced the price by 860,000 Rand. So the saving to the department over the period of time was considerable. However, what happened was the contract was extended by another 5 years. So it was extended by 5 years. So in actual fact, we were scoring. But I didn't see it that way. So I approached Gavin Watson and I said to him, I said, you know, Angelo is very concerned and annoyed with me because he says you cut a deal with him. My concern was also why I couldn't fathom out why he would agree to pay 7 million over just like that. And Watson then said to me, he said that in summary, he says, listen, you're not paying him 7 million rand, you can pay him on a monthly basis.
Right, let's just go back to paragraph 44.4, where you do say what you have just told the chair, that the contract was extended for a further 5 years. Was there any tender process involved?
Nothing whatsoever.
Any treasury approval involved?
No.
And you say more favorable terms were included in the extended contract. Is that so?
Yes, that is true.
What was the annual gross value to Bosasa or Bosasa's subsidiary in relation to this contract?
Share 93.6 million.
At the time you were wondering why on earth pay Mr. Radhakrishna 7 million rand when the contract price had actually been reduced, had you at that stage examined the extended contract in any detail?
No, I hadn't.
So you were not aware of any more favorable contract terms at the stage you expressed your doubts?
No, I was doubtful of the transaction. I hadn't seen yet what Neil Radhakrishna had put in to the actual contract.
Were the benefits of the extended contract to Bosasa and its subsidiary explained to you at a later stage?
Kevin Wakeford explained it to me later, and he explained that what they'd done was extended the term of the contract, but also made it more feasible in terms of increases as well. So the actual increments that you would get would compound on the bottom and grow quicker. So what might be worth 9 million now would probably be worth, say, 13 million rand, whereas if you'd started off with 10 million, you'd only been at 12 million at the same time. So it made sense, and it seemed to work.
Was the relationship between Bosasa and its subsidiary on the one hand and the Department of Home Affairs on the other the subject of public comment at this time?
It was, I mentioned it earlier, it was continuously in the press, and everybody was unhappy with the Bosasa contract.
The negotiation of a reduced price, did this do anything to mitigate public concern about the contract?
I think to a large degree it helped. It kept everybody quiet, Chair, and I think that people started realizing that maybe Bosasa and Ndela isn't a bad notion at all.
Was Mr. Radhakrishna happy about the fact that he wasn't to receive 7 million rand?
No, he wasn't happy at all, Chair. I had all my days with that gentleman.
Right. And in relation to the monthly payment, what happened?
So I said to him, well, look, I wasn't part of your transaction. I didn't debate anything with you. And I said, all I can do is go to Gavin Watson and say, listen, what about if he puts in a monthly invoice?
And did he submit monthly invoices?
Yes, he did. But he did it through one of his friends who's got a wine merchant agency. So I remember that it was wine merchants or something like that. And we processed, I think it was around 75,000 rand a month for him.
And were these payments affected, to your knowledge?
Yes, they were. And the chap who did that was the financial guy there, Carlos. Did
you at some stage stop responding to the invoices from Mr. Radhakrishna?
Yeah, it was about 2015, if I remember correctly, Chair, and we were under scrutiny by the banks, we were under scrutiny by the auditors, so eventually I just stopped it, and we couldn't actually, in 2015, afford it as a company either, because there was major cash flow issues. So what we did was I said to him, look, let me help you with an alternative until things come right. And we did the rebranding of his company and all his graphic design and that, instead of paying him on a monthly basis. Because the company was really battling with cash flow at that stage.
Then on page 91, paragraph 45, you deal with further irregular payments,
That is correct.
what you call irregular payments.
That is correct.
What is not clear from the allegations in paragraph 45.1 to 45.6 is firstly whether these payments were made to the individuals you name, for example in paragraph 45.1, and secondly whether those persons that you name were actually influential in the irregular granting of contracts. So I'd like you to be very careful, please, and bear in mind that when you name a person, as you do here, that there must be some link or reason for naming that person.
Well then, Chair, then if it's the feeling of the team that maybe I shouldn't name them, then...
No, we can't stop your evidence. You're here and we will investigate the veracity of your evidence. We will allow people who are named to respond. The choice is yours. I'm just placing
Okay, I'll give it to you.
a red flag.
Chair, I'll give it to you as it happened. So, I was introduced a few years ago to the Treasurer General of the Youth League, Reggie Nkabinda. Okay, he's also known as the Commander or the General or something like that in the north, in the Krugersdorp area. But I was introduced to him by Gavin Watson, who explained to me that he was very close to Nomvula Mokonyane and that I must see if we can assist him, and I had to help him at one stage with our design studio because we had a whole internal design and branding studio. And basically what we needed to help him and see where we could assist develop his brand and his company. But they were a bit more influential than that. So on one occasion, I met in Nkabinda with an associate of his by the name of Sam Sekgota. And I was aware that Reggie had relationships with various politicians. I knew he was very well connected, but more specifically with Tom Moyane. I knew that. I knew he was very close to Tom Moyane and he would be able to resolve any issues at correctional services.
Is that Mr. Nkabinda or Mr. Sekgotla?
Mr. Nkabinda.
You say you knew that he was very close to Mr. Tom Moyane.
Correct, sir.
Okay, thank you.
All right. It's not in my statement, but I learned this from Eric Moritz, who I was told to speak to in connection with getting close to Tom Moyane. Remember, we never actually had a relationship with Tom Moyane either, so it was concerning. So in 2016, I was called into the boardroom at Bosasa, and Gavin Watson was there, and in the meeting was Gavin, Patrick Monyeki, Reggie Nkabinda, and Sam Sekgota. And I was a bit surprised because there were no other directors in the meeting, just Gavin. And I walked into the meeting and they said, listen, I think you better work with Sekgota and with Reggie if we want to retain the existing catering contract at the correctional services. So I was a bit shocked because my understanding was we were on top of the issues and, you know, there's no need to work with anybody else. But evidently the tender had been leaked out and they had a copy of it. I hadn't even seen the copy.
Who had a copy of it?
It was Reggie Nkabinda's, their team. I can't remember exactly who, unless I made a note of it. But I was shown the tender document.
And was this before the tender was issued or after the tender was issued?
Before the tender was issued.
Before?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So it was concerning to me. So we then started negotiating with them because you must remember, Chair, that this contract would make between 20 and 25 million rand net a month. So you had to look after it. And the people that we thought were looking after it weren't on top of their game. They were fast asleep and they'd lost the opportunity, and we had nearly lost out on this contract. Now, if you lose that contract, that's 25 million down the drain. So we were very concerned about it.
25 million rand per month.
Per month, yes. So what happened was, the concern I had was that if somebody else had the upper hand, then we would sit with a problem. So myself and Gavin Watson had a chat, and we then went back to them and said, okay, what do we do? How do we sort this problem out? And Sekgotha basically said, well, listen, I've got a company. You pay me 5 million rand into my company, and we'll get you an extension, which then would give us time to work out a plan of sorts on how to manage this thing. So we paid, we got the extension, I think it was the next day, and we paid a 5 million rand consultancy fee. An invoice was raised from their consulting company, and then we raised the second agreement.
You talk of an extension. Are you talking of an extension of the existing contract pending the award of the new tender?
So it was a 6-month extension.
Right. Carry on, please.
So 6 months, Chair, it was the extension, and in all fairness, 5 million rand for 6 months. 6 months is equivalent to 125 million, 150 million rand, and you're paying 5 million for that. So we paid the money. It was transferred the next day, and then we did a second agreement with Sekgotha, and that was for the renewal of the catering contract. But this agreement required the payment of 10 million rand to Sekgotha's company. But Gavin refused to pay that amount. He said, no, he's not going to pay that much. The people that we had, that were working for us, who slipped up the first time, wouldn't slip up the second time. They would get it right. So Sekgotha just didn't bother getting a renewal of the catering contract. And what happened was that we lost, at that stage, I think it's about 40% of the catering contract. Does that explain it in detail?
No, that's fine for the moment. Paragraph 45.2, line 2. The name Sekgotha is spelled S-E-G-O-T-E. Elsewhere in paragraph 45, it's spelled S-E-K-G-O-T-A. Do you know which is the correct spelling?
I actually do think 45.3 is the correct spelling.
45.3.
Yeah, I think that is.
S-E-K-G-O-T-A. That's the consistent spelling apart from 45.2.
I'm not sure.
All right. Let's go on then to paragraph 46.
I'm sorry, before you go there, in regard to this, what you call the second agreement, you said in terms of that agreement, payment of 10 million rand was required, and Mr. Gavin Watson refused to pay that amount. In regard to what you referred to as the first agreement, 5 million rand was required to be paid, and it was paid.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, with regard to the second so-called agreement, you're not suggesting that the figure of 10 million had previously been agreed between Busasa and Mr. Sekgotha, and then, but Mr. Watson reneged on the agreement. That's not what you are saying, or is that what you are saying?
It's exactly what I'm saying, Chair.
Oh, he had previously agreed.
He's agreed. We drafted the agreements. When it came to signing the agreement, he pulled out at the last minute.
Okay, before it was signed, it could be signed.
Because he took advice from people that said that he doesn't need to pay that kind of money for that agreement.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Paragraph 46, You make a general allegation that will be the subject matter of further evidence. Would you just summarize, please, the allegation in paragraph 46 for the Chair?
I think they're more than allegations. I think they're factual. So on a regular basis, BSAS had a team set aside to do this. And this team would provide full security solutions across the board. They were called a special installations team. They had their own vehicles, they had their own stock, and they would go around from house to house, actually putting in CCTV systems, but not only that, but sorting out electric fences, electrified gates, everything from your pool pump right the way through. So this team, special projects, would not charge the person, but they would get instructions from myself, or I would take instructions from Gavin Watson and send it out to them, and they'd go and do the work. So basically, this team
was a team of how many people, if you are able to tell, more
Chair,
or less?
if I think there was about 8 people in the team.
Yes, who were more or less the standing team to do these special projects.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, all right, proceed.
Okay, so this team would do absolutely anything and could fix anything from a pond to a broken doorbell. But what's more important is that they would be sent from site to site to do installations, maintenance, follow-ups, client customer care. Sorry. But this was done at no cost to the recipient.
Yes.
So as a minister, you would get, if you needed your house fitted out with CCTV and maybe a movie theater system, you pick up the phone BSAS, they'll send somebody over and you don't need to worry about paying for it. But that debt remains forever. So that's what was offered.
Yes.
Detail in regard to the beneficiaries of this practice will be given later in evidence
Correct.
by someone else.
Yes, that is correct.
You say the recipient of the benefit did not pay for it. Did the state pay?
Well, indirectly, yes, the state is paying, because if you're paying for bribery money, that's what I'm...
Well, I'm not asking you to extrapolate on...
No, the state never
to that
paid a
extent.
bill.
The bill for the services, was that
No.
paid by the state?
No, it was not.
Then,
And no invoices would be sent to the recipients of these benefits.
If there are invoices that have been backdated and sent, there was never an invoice sent.
Yes.
and how were these expenses catered for in the books of BSASA?
Just through operational costs.
So they were actually deducted from income in the tax returns.
That is correct, Chair.
This special project existed from when, if you are able to remember?
Chair,
A special team, special projects team.
if I remember correctly, it was from 2013, and they were actually a special projects team that I would use to go and do special projects. But then it just evolved, and
Yes.
people could use it, and they started to abuse it.
And when you left Busasa, was this special projects team still in operation?
It was for a short period of time, and then they dismissed everybody out of the team and re-employed new people in the team. And the reason for that is they were concerned that the old people would uncover or unfold what was happening there and whose houses were being monitored, that type of thing.
Okay.
Paragraph 47, you deal with the issue of black economic empowerment in relation to the BSASA group of companies. Would you tell the Chair, please, briefly of what you wish to say in that regard?
Chair, basically what's happened is BEE in South Africa has not been truly representative by many companies, and we're all guilty of it. But most importantly, most concerning was that if you set up a complex network of subsidiaries and various entities and trusts, and you make it very complicated, the identification of the true BE of a company is virtually impossible. And this is what's been happening. I'm not saying it was only endemic to Bosasa. What I am saying is, I know how it was done. And basically, you know, that to move from a premise of where you were a BE level 4 to a BE level 2 or 1, unless you have the right credentials, you can't be there. But now, what was happening was there was manufactured credentials. So I would manufacture a credential by putting somebody in that place, giving them the shares, giving them full autonomy, shareholding, but at the same time having an agreement on the side, which basically says you don't own the shares until such time as you pay for them. And maybe there's nothing illegal with that, but then surely you can't rate yourself as BE if you still have a yield, hold the shares behind. And what started to happen was it would get worse and worse and worse. So there's an elaborate masking, or fronting is the right word, of BE. And it needs to be uncovered and it needs to be fixed up.
Right, let me just ask you two questions in that regard.
Yes.
You say that the arrangements were complex and
Yes.
detailed. Are you prepared to assist in any further investigation in that regard?
Most definitely.
Secondly, and as a question of broad summary, in the tender documents that were presented by Bosasa to various government departments, was the true BEE status of the Bosasa group of companies represented?
They were not, Chair. They were not.
I want to move to
I'm sorry, Mr. Pretorius. Looks like there is nobody from the administration wing here. I gave permission at the beginning of the hearings in August for only a certain number of TV cameras to be inside this hall. But I seem to see a number of cameras now. Somebody will just have to investigate, because I've not given permission for any more cameras since then. Because if there are any challenges, there are channels for requests to be made. And things mustn't just be done anyhow.
Chair, I see there's a camera at the back. I'm not sure whether that is an accredited
Well,
camera or not.
There is a camera at the back that I believe has been there since the beginning. Or at least there has been a camera there. I don't know if it's the same that has always been there. But there are others that I see, other than those here at the front, which there seem to be others in respect of which I have not given permission. The administration will have to investigate what's happening. Thank you. You may proceed, Mr. Pretorius.
Thank you, Chair. Can we move, please, Mr. Agrizzi, to your statement, affidavit, page 40, at paragraph 48, page 93.
We can.
Do you recall a meeting in 2010?
I do.
Is that the correct date?
That's correct.
After your return from vacation, you were requested or told to go to a meeting with the Watson brothers at the Michelangelo Hotel.
That is correct, Chair.
What was happening at the time in relation to Bosasa?
Chair, at the time we were at the pinnacle of the SIU investigation that had been presented, I think, in government, in Parliament at least, and there was massive negative press going around. And it was untenable. And one of the reasons, I'm not having a go at the family or anything, but one of the reasons I put this into my statement is because plenty of people have asked me, why did you not just leave sooner? Well, it wasn't that easy. So I thought, let me incorporate it here.
What happened at the meeting?
Well, the meeting was very clear. There was endless press negativity. There was the investigation going on. There were the Hawks. There were the subpoenas to Mark and Sharon Taverner. There was all these things happening. And we were called in, and I recall distinctly where the fish pond is, one floor up. We went right to the end of the corridor where there's a chair and that, and basically the meeting involved myself, Andries van Tonder, Gavin Watson, and we were told that, listen, you guys are in this pact with us, we are brothers now, and you try break loose and there's going to be problems.
So how many people were in that meeting? Yourself?
It was myself,
Andries van Tonder?
Andries van Tonder, Valence Watson, I can't recall if Ronnie was there or Chiki was there, and Gavin. And we were in the middle of the probably the worst time ever for the group.
Thank you.
At that time, notwithstanding the negative press that Bosasa was receiving, did visits to the Bosasa office park on the part of politicians and industry leaders continue?
It was amazing because we just had this continuous flow of high-powered politicians that would arrive and be taken on tours. We spent the good part of a few months just doing tours nearly every day, with politicians visiting and coming to see what it was all about.
Let's go on then to paragraph 49. You there refer to matters relevant to the release of the Special Investigations Unit report.
Correct.
During 2009, was this a matter that was discussed internally at Bosasa?
No. Well, it was a morning occurrence, Chair, where we would discuss the exposure of Bosasa and the press and the SIU and the probe and how everybody would try and get to us. So every morning we'd take a walk in the park, literally. And we'd discuss the matter walking in the park because then nobody could tape us, nobody could listen in on us and that type of thing. And at that stage as well, we were getting very edgy about all this happening. We weren't used to it. And it was then that Gavin Watson insisted that we go on holidays with him specifically.
Who goes on holiday?
Well, normally the three guys would go on holiday together. So it would be Andries, Gavin and myself.
Right. Did you go on holiday?
Yes, we did.
And at that stage you say that Bosasa was receiving negative press publicity and there were investigations current.
Yeah, and it was exasperated by the fact that I was told to take the fall for Gavin Watson.
Well, did you speak to Mr. Watson after he had suggested this holiday?
Well, I was sorry, I don't understand your question. Did I speak to him after we decided to have the holiday?
Well, in paragraph 49.2, you say Gavin Watson insisted
Yes.
that he, Van Tonder, and yourself go on an overseas
right.
trip together, right?
That is correct.
You explain in that paragraph the context in which that suggestion was made. In other words, what was happening to Bosasa at the time.
That's right.
Right. You then say in the same paragraph, I confronted Gavin Watson in the boardroom. Did
That's
you?
correct.
At this time?
That's correct.
What did you say to Mr. Watson?
Well, I said to him I'd resign.
I'm sorry. Firstly, that's not what you say in your statement, but could you place that?
Sorry, I'm a bit lightheaded at the moment. Is it possible to reduce the air conditioning again? It's very hot in here.
You would like it colder? You'd like it to be a little cold?
Chair, I'm
Cold.
not used to, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, they will do so. It mustn't be too cold.
No, no.
I have a little bit of flu, so but they'll make it a little cooler.
I must say, the witness has informed me he suffers from diabetes.
Yes.
And at times it affects his blood sugar. I make no
Yes.
excuses on his behalf for anything he might say or not say, but he has expressed to me that he wants to tough it out, as it were. I'm not sure that that's a good idea, but maybe he can make up his mind.
Well, Mr. Agrizzi, do tell us whenever you would like a break or when we are taking too long. You know, I was saying this morning we must make up for the time that we lost when there was a problem with online.
No, it's not a problem.
If there is any problem, please let us know, and we'll try and accommodate you
Not a
as
problem.
far as we can. But I did want to take a few minutes break at this time. Can we take a break, and we will resume at 25 to 4.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
We adjourn.
Mr. Agrizzi, we're at paragraph 49.2 of your statement, and you have told the chair of the first part of that paragraph. Just take a minute to refresh your memory in relation to the last 4 lines.
Chair, at that stage we were under a lot of pressure. Gavin insisted that we go on a holiday together. But the one issue that I had was I actually confronted Gavin Watson in the boardroom one day when he made a suggestion to me. He told me he had received some advice, and he said that I should take a fall on behalf of the company and on behalf of Bosasa in the SIU investigation. And I was annoyed. I voiced my discontent with him, and I felt betrayed by him. I was very upset. And that evening, I actually left the office. That evening, he called me numerous times and started to apologize. And eventually, I accepted his apology. And
Before you go on, please, what did Gavin Watson mean? It may be obvious, but let's put it on record.
Okay, on record.
The words "take the full."
On record, an attorney had advised him, some attorney had advised him that what should happen is that I should admit to absolutely everything, that I did it all by myself. I corrupted MT, I corrupted Gillingham, and I should take the fall for it. He said to me what would happen would be that there would be a fine of about 30 million that the company would pay, but I would have to have the criminal record for the rest of my life, but it would save the company.
Before you go on, I'd like to ask you a question about that. It's a matter that the legal team may deal with. It's certainly a matter that people who get to cross-examine you in due course may raise. But one of the issues is, what was the reason you decided to come forward and give the evidence that you have given? And I want to ask you, is one of the reasons, or possibly one of the reasons, that you knew that Mr. Watson was going to lay all the blame on you and make you take responsibility for everything that happened, and you decided to preempt him by coming clean?
There are a couple of reasons.
Well, just let's deal with this reason for the moment.
I would say that is one of the reasons, yes. You have given evidence regarding other reasons, and we may deal with that at the conclusion of your evidence. Thank you.
You say that evening, after he had made the suggestion that you take the fall, he had called you numerous times.
That's correct.
Apologized, you accepted his apology.
Profusely. Would you like me to continue, Chair, explaining it?
Mr.
if you
Fitzgerald will ask you, will tell you.
I'm satisfied for the moment, unless you want to raise anything.
No, I think you know what I want to raise, Chair, is what concerned me the most was that I went to the legal representative. I'm not going to mention his name necessarily, it's in the papers, but I went to the legal representative of the company, the attorneys, that I worked very closely with for 16 years. And you know that every time I went to the person, I said, listen, how are we going to sort this out? Should we not open this thing up, get the people in, let's talk about it to the SIU. You know, Chair, what I was told by this brilliant legal mind, shut up and just toe the line. Otherwise, you're going to implicate everybody. And that was perhaps an awakening moment for me, that I realized that why would this person, after all these years, still indoctrinate me with it? And that's what's happened to the other witnesses that are following me right now. Is that you're indoctrinated to believe that you cannot talk out. If you talk out, you don't have money, you don't have an attorney, you've got no protection, and they'll swing the whole thing against you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, let's go on then to paragraph 49.4. The overseas trip that Gavin Watson had suggested, did it take place?
That's correct, it did take place.
And in relation to the relationship between Mr. Watson on the one hand and yourself and Mr. Van Tonda on the other, was this issue discussed?
The issue was discussed in depth. We discussed the issues. We got them all out on the table. But the more one looks at it in retrospect, it was all done just to appease.
Right. You say in paragraph 49.3, if I can just go back, that the attorney of whom you've spoken agreed with your concern about Gavin Watson's suggestion that you take the fall for Bisasa. Is that in fact correct?
Yes, he did.
Let's go on then. Very briefly, what did Gavin Watson say to yourself and Van Tonda in relation to the context within which you are operating at the moment, the forthcoming or contemplated prosecution?
He said that we have to remain inseparable, we have to be together, otherwise what will happen is they'll break up the team and everything will come out.
And you say here, if one went down, what did he say would happen?
Everybody would go down.
And what was Mr. Watson's attitude to whether matters were under control or otherwise?
I think the attitude was that he believed that he had everything under control, politically.
Did you believe that?
At one stage, I started doubting all of this.
Right, 49.7, you talk of the effect that these circumstances at the time were having on you. Would you explain that to the chair, please?
Chair, I've watched that company grow from when I started at 430 people to 6,500, and they're all families. And the biggest concern for me was always, you know, the families and what is going to happen to them. And I'm not, you can speak to anybody that's there or that was there. But I eventually started believing that there was no hope. I'd be left to the wolves, and the real threat of leaving Gavin was basically that you'd have to go against him. And I knew what he was capable of. I have felt it.
So you say here in paragraph 49.7 that the Bisasa directors were of a certain view, were all of a certain view. What was that?
The directors all of the view that we have to fight this and not give up, and just keep fighting the SIU case, fighting the NPA, fighting the Hawks, just keep fighting, until eventually it would go away. I remember Brian Bibak used to tell me this thing will never get to trial. He said to me, the NPA is useless, they'll never ever be able to prosecute.
And your own belief as to whether you should stick with Gavin Watson or you should leave Gavin Watson and the consequences of that, you deal with that in paragraph 49.7?
Well, Chair, let me give you an example. One of the instructions I'd received was to put 30 million in a trust account to protect us, and a further 10 million in another trust account with another attorney to protect us as well. Now, and I was told categorically that that might not be enough. We might have to put a little bit more in, and so I started getting concerned, because if it's going to cost 40 million in the beginning to defend this. How the heck can I come out, speak to people, and fight this thing on my own? And quite simply, I have gone through the process now. Would I do it again? Yes, I would. But the fact of the matter is, if you don't have a little bit of a war chest, you are finished. So quite simply, I mean, we are now close on about 20 families that are looking to stop this. So it is taxing on all of us.
While you were in Paris on holiday, did you receive information about the release of the SIU report?
Accidentally, the SIU report had come out and had accidentally been given to us, which was sent through an associate. Gavin asked me to arrange a meeting then to discuss with Brian Biebuck on how we were going to handle this. So we had this meeting with Brian Biebuck, and we
Well,
said,
let's just, I don't want to go behind that meeting. As a result of that meeting, were certain people given certain responsibilities
yes,
in relation to the proposed or contemplated prosecution?
that is correct, Chair.
Who got what responsibilities?
Andries van Tonder's responsibility was to handle the banks, the financing, and the cash flows of the business, to make sure there's enough money in the bank to be able to fight this. My responsibility was to handle all the legal aspects in conjunction with Brian Biebuck, and Gavin Watson's responsibility was to handle the politics that were happening out there.
And then in paragraph 50.1, did Gavin Watson at this stage begin to say whether he was in fact involved in any irregularity or not?
He started denying it, and he started saying, well, I'll just blame everybody else. My signature is nowhere to be found.
What happened in August 2016?
Chair, in August 2016, I just couldn't take it anymore. I was tired of fighting. I'd basically given up. I was really annoyed about all of this. And on my own, and on my own free will, I sat down with Dr. Jürgen Smith, who was a kind of a mentor to me. And he was a very wise old man, and he said to me, look, I'm concerned about you. And I just then thought to myself, listen, I've given 19 years of my life. I wasn't feeling well. I was not sleeping at night. And eventually I thought, no, it's not a life to live. I also had been offered something else to look at, and I decided to pack it up and go. So I didn't make any demands. All I did, Chair, was I literally closed my laptop on my desk, took my keys on my car, got into my car, and I went home. And I switched off my cell phone.
Without saying you were leaving, without putting in a letter of resignation?
I did resign to Dr. Smith.
Or you did?
Yes.
Verbally or in writing?
In writing.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
What was your state of health at this time?
I didn't feel well. I was feeling as if I looked at people as if they're blaming me now because they're being fired, they're being destroyed, families being destroyed. It made me sick. At that stage, I didn't know I was sick, but I was very sick.
Well, just remind me again, I have good recollection that Mr. Mansell, for example, had been Mr. Gavin Watson's partner from a long time previously, and you have mentioned Dr. Smith from time to time, but I think you have just said you resigned to him, or you told him, or you gave him the letter.
That's correct.
What was he at Busasa?
Dr. Smith was one of the founder members, and he was an elderly man. He's a professor, and he had been from the onset the start of Meritum Hostels, which then was bought out. But he was wise, and I liked his the way he dealt with us. And
Yes.
even though I was senior than him, I went to him for advice.
Yes, okay.
So I just, because he was running the payroll, I left my resignation with him, and I said to him, you won't see me again.
Yes, okay. And what was his reaction?
Well, he's in two minds. He says, I want to see you happy, and I want to see you go.
Okay, thank you.
And the fact of the matter is that, he was a bit concerned, but he wanted to see me happy as well. He told me that. And so I resigned, and I switched off my phone for 2 weeks.
Thank you.
The day after you had left Bosasa, did you receive any telephone calls?
My phone was off, Chair, but it was incessant. My wife would get calls, then I put my phone on, then all the messages come through. So it was just a barrage of interruptions and messages. You've been chosen by God to lead with me, and all this stuff to try and get me back there.
Did you accept a call after a period of 2 weeks?
After 2 weeks, I did take a call, probably the biggest mistake I ever made. But I refused to see Gavin Watson.
From whom was this call?
It was from Brian Bebuck, the attorney. Brian Bebuck pleaded with me to have a meeting with Gavin Watson. He wanted me to meet with him and to sort things out. And I said to him, I don't want to meet. I wasn't interested in meeting. And he said, no, I have to meet. There's issues that we need to deal with. And he cautioned me. He said, listen, you better stick together with Gavin Watson. Otherwise, you're all going to end up in jail. There was a threat that was always meted out to us. So I refused to meet with him. I just said, look, I'm not going to meet with him. The next minute, Daniel Cheeky Watson, arrived at my house and started talking to me. Do you want me to carry on?
Is that the conversation that you referred to in paragraph 51?
That's correct.
Tell the chair about that, please.
In 51, explain, Chair, that I was confronted by Cheeky. I was told, listen, you better take the reins at Bosasa. I want you back in the seat. There's well-being of 4,500 or 5,000 employees that are dependent on you. You better go and help. You better start working. Gavin has agreed that he will remedy his old ways. This is as it happened. He said, you know what? You take over now, all right? He's an old dog, he said, and he needs to go home. And as long as he's there, there's going to be a problem. So he said, you come back, and I'm going to make sure that you're looked after. So he made a substantial offer, a retainer, and a shareholding agreement. So what the agreement entailed was a 10-year retention agreement, and it entailed probably earnings of about 12 million rand per annum, plus a lump sum payment, plus bonuses every year, plus shareholding in the company as well. So there was shareholding in one of the companies called Lamazest, which literally is where all the dividends go anyway.
Spell that, please.
Lamozest.
Just before you go on, you've resigned. You then, for 2 weeks, refused to take calls, despite many calls being made to you on behalf of the Watson brothers, amongst others. You then receive a visit from Daniel or Cheeky Watson.
That's correct.
You have a conversation with him, and
Yeah.
he makes certain offers to you which would involve your return to Bosasa. And you've just stipulated some of the terms and conditions of that return, encapsulated in the offer by Cheeky Watson. Correct?
Do I have to repeat them?
No, you don't. You just,
Okay. So basically,
Sorry, I just want to ask you, what was the approximate value of the offer that was made to you? You know?
Well, before he says that, he must just confirm, Mr. Agrizzi must just confirm. I think Mr. Pretoria skipped another event that you mentioned in that sequence, namely the attorney's call to you before the visit by Mr. Chiki Watson.
That is correct.
Okay, all right.
I think the total value of the contract, Chair, was about R250 million.
Per annum or?
For the 10 years.
Over 10 years.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you mentioned here Mr. Chiki Watson, and you may have mentioned him once or so earlier, I'm not sure, in the statement.
Yes.
What was his position, if any, in Bosasa? I know from what you have said that he was Mr. Gavin Watson's brother, but was he a director at Bosasa, or what was he?
No, he was just, me and him had a fair relationship, and I didn't want to see Gavin Watson at all, and they sent him because of we had a fair relationship. I wouldn't say it was a brilliant relationship. It was very businesslike at the most of the times, but, you know, they sent him to negotiate with me. And it wasn't a negotiation, Chair. They literally put an offer on the table and said to me, do you want this, or do you want to negotiate? And I accepted it out of good faith. I didn't negotiate.
Also, this visit, he had no formal position in Bosasa as such, but he came to you on this occasion at the request of, on behalf of Mr. Gavin Watson.
That's correct.
And he made the offer that you have told me about.
Brian Biebuck actually did the offer.
Sorry?
Brian Biebuck, actually, the attorney, did the offer with Gavin Watson.
Yes.
And they sent it via Chiki to me.
Yes.
And I looked at it and I accepted it. I didn't negotiate. I wasn't interested. You know, Chair, sometimes you can horse trade in that. I'm not like that. They put something in front of me and I signed it.
Yes.
Obviously, I read it.
Yes.
But I could have probably said, listen, I want 300 million for the contract. And they were happy with, I was happy with what they offered me in the contract. That's why it's not a secret to anybody.
Was it the attractive terms of the proposed agreement that made you change your mind about not wanting to continue at Bosasa, or by the time they put the offer to you, you had second thoughts? What was the position?
You know what made me make the decision to go back was because I was told Gavin Watson will allow you to take the reins. We can get rid of this apolitical corruption, this political corruption that is taking place, and we can fix it up and we can become apolitical as a company. And that's what interested me, because that's all I've been fighting for all those years.
Okay, thank you.
Well, you may have been fighting for it. You were doing the opposite, though. You were participating in what you term political activities of the company.
I don't dispute that.
Let's just get back to this meeting with Chiki Watson, because it's not clear, at least to me, from your statement. This meeting would have happened sometime during August or shortly after the end of August 2016. Is that correct?
No, it happened, I'd need to check in the annexures. I think it was about the 12th of August, 2016.
All right. The meeting with Chiki Watson, was it a verbal offer involved in that meeting, or did he present to you a written document to sign?
Presented me with a written document.
And you say you signed it for, amongst other reasons, the fact that Gavin Watson had apparently resolved to put an end to the old manner of operation of the Bosasa companies.
That's correct.
It was, in addition, from a monetary point of view, an attractive offer.
I think more attractive to me was the shareholding than the financial value, because the shareholding would have given me rights.
Right, okay. Did you return to Bosasa pursuant to signature of this agreement?
Yes, I did.
All right, before you go on, please, in the beginning of your statement, let's just find the paragraph, you referred to 2 agreements. You recall that?
I do.
Just want to find it, please. Just bear with me. Paragraph 6.28 on page 8. You have told the Chair that on or about 25 August 2016 you entered into a settlement agreement, which is Annexure B,
That is correct.
that secured your re-employment with the business for a period of 10 years after you had resigned.
Yes, it was.
Is that the agreement you're referring
That
to
is the
now?
agreement, correct.
And you signed that at the instance of Cheeky Watson?
Correct.
What page is that, Mr. Pretorius, the agreement?
Page 8, the agreement itself is Annexure B, but the reference to the agreement is at page 8 of the statement at paragraph 6.28.
Okay, I just want the actual
The actual agreement,
agreement because I did
Chair,
look
is
for
at
it.
page 116 to 135.
Thank you.
Subsequent to signing the agreement, did you return to Bosasa?
I did.
Did you make any presentation pursuant to the agreement and your understanding of its terms?
Yes, I did, Chair. If I can explain to you what happened was I was given a professor from Wharton University, or lecturer at Wharton University, that worked with me on doing on re-engineering and drafting a document to do a turnaround strategy.
How was this presentation received?
It was exceptionally well received.
I'm sorry, you said you were given a professor?
From Wharton University to work
Yes,
with,
to help you do what?
to restructure and re-engineer the company.
Or pursuant to this agreement?
Yes,
Okay.
Wharton is a university in the United States, I understand, spelled W-H-A-R-T-O-N.
that is correct.
You say your presentation was well received. Did that include Gavin Watson?
Most definitely. He was over the moon by the strategy and the way we were going to take it forward.
What happened subsequently in November 2016?
Maybe before that, in terms of this presentation or your proposal as to how to take Bosasa forward, did that document contemplate that there would no longer be these payments of bribes and so on?
Correct, Chair.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
You were telling the chair about
Well, Chair,
November 2016.
sorry, I'm just getting to my notes. Sorry. So in November 2016,
Oh, maybe before you get there
Yes,
again, round about when in the year was it when this presentation was made?
it was in early September, Chair.
Yes.
The first 2 weeks in the second 2 weeks in September.
Yes, and subsequent, or did this proposal that you made, did it contemplate that implementation would start soon, or was implementation to start quite some time in the future?
The implementation would start happening from November, December, January, February, and various I mean, we had very high-powered individuals there who could assist us.
Okay.
Employees that were brilliant minds that
Yeah.
could assist us.
Okay, thank you.
You were about to tell the chair of what happened in November 2016.
Well,
We're at paragraph 51.4 of your statement.
yes, I'm just, sorry, I'm looking for a reference point on something else. Sorry, Chair. In November 2016, I just came to realize that he's not being sincere with me, and what he promised was...
That is Mr. Gavin Watson.
That's correct. And there's something wrong because he was not happy, as he knew that, you know, that I was making changes. And I then demanded, I said, look, it was my son's wedding on the 27th. I knew he was going to be at the wedding. And I then, the day after, sent him a message, listen, yeah, we need to sort out the shareholding.
What shareholding?
That's the shareholding that I was promised in terms of my agreement to come back on the retention.
That was important to you, you have told the chair.
It was important, Chair, because once you have shareholding, you know as well as I do that you then can call for reasons and you can make it a little bit more difficult to do these type of things. So you can start raising concerns.
Between your return to Bosasa in terms of that agreement that you concluded with Mr. Watson for going back to Bosasa,
Yes, Chair.
between your return to Bosasa and November 2016, other than the presentation that sought to show how you would take Bosasa forward, were there any aspects of that agreement that were implemented or were contemplated would be implemented in the meantime during that period? And were they implemented?
Chair, everything was implemented except the shareholding. He held back on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Did Mr. Watson, that is Mr. Gavin Watson, respond to your demand for the transfer of shares or the registration in your name of the shares promised?
I'm trying to put this nicely. He was not happy. He said, you know, it's turbulent times and that, and he didn't want to do it because he knew exactly where it was going, Chair. He knew that if I had the shareholding that was in the agreement, basically there wouldn't be much corruption that could take place.
Right.
Because the cash and that type of thing, you wouldn't be able to get it out.
Did you think that at this stage, after you had returned, Mr. Gavin Watson believed that you no longer wanted to be involved in corruption and you no longer wanted the company to be involved in corruption?
Yeah. Yes, Chair. He knew it. Because, I tell you why I say that, because myself and one of my colleagues were talking, and I'm sure somebody overheard it and told him that I personally had had enough. And I know it's an easy way to say, oh, well, now you're saying this. But I haven't been caught. I didn't need to come here. I didn't need to open this thing up.
Thank you.
Was anything said in your turnaround strategy and the presentation of that in the two sessions you've referred to a moment ago about a change in character of the manner in which the company did business and expressly about a cessation of corrupt activities?
Well, I think the whole thing in the turnaround strategy was to make it more focused on non-governmental business. And get away from the governmental type business, which indicates that, you know, you don't want to get involved with corruption. And quite simply because corruption doesn't really happen, well, I suppose it happens in every single entity, but it's less so in the private sector. Where I thought there was opportunities was a sector where I believed that there'd be minimized corruption allowed as well.
Right. So you say, as I understand it, it wasn't said expressly in your presentations, but might have been implied.
It was implied. It was implied, I can tell you what was implied, that we become apolitical as a company.
Apolitical.
Correct.
Of course, you did give evidence, and you must tell me if my recollection of your evidence is not correct. You did say that in the early years after you had joined Busasa or Jambo as it was called.
Correct.
Initially, the Jambo had been involved in some corruption in regard to contracts that it had or obtained from private companies, mining companies and so on, or did I misunderstand your evidence?
It was obtained through corrupting people. You're 100% right.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Leave aside your belief as to what was going on in Gavin Watson's mind. That's something that will arise from an analysis of all the evidence and probabilities and further questioning if Mr. Watson himself gives evidence. His response to your demand for shareholding, as I understand it, was it to refuse to pay you or just to fudge the issue and delay payment?
It wasn't about payment of shares. It was about actually getting the share certificates. I think that's the important part. And he just delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed.
And that's the shareholding?
That's correct, yes.
You say at a stage, and I'm referring to 51.5, paragraph 51.5 of your affidavit, you were requested by Gavin Watson to make a payment.
That's correct.
Can you remember to whom this payment was to be made?
Well, this was a normal delivery that needed to take place to a specific person that he would normally make the payment to. I can't remember the exact person. What happened was I got sick then, and I don't know who the person was.
Let's just deal with your statement step by step. How much was involved?
265,000 rand.
Again, a cash payment?
Yes.
In a security bag?
Correct.
Why didn't you just say, look, that's over, we're not making these payments anymore?
You know, I suppose maybe you get to a point where you don't want to confront people. So you don't want to get into a confrontation. It's before Christmas. It's, you know, I wasn't feeling well at all. I didn't want to get into an argument.
Objectively speaking, your acceptance of the money and presumably of the instruction, and I'll come to whether it was carried out, is an objective fact indicating that really nothing had changed at all.
I can't dispute that with you.
But also, I see you remember the amount, but you don't remember the name.
I don't.
But there are lots of amounts and names that you have remembered, that you have told us about over the past, 2 weeks now.
Chair, I was given the bag and I was told the person's name,
Yeah.
and my mind wasn't there. I put in the boot of my car. We were standing outside in the car park, and I was given the black bag. I threw it into the boot of my car. I was supposed to do a delivery on the 23rd or something because the person was away, and I can't remember the guy's name now.
23rd of?
Of December.
No, it can't be. Are you? Are you sure 23rd of December?
I think it was the 23rd. I was supposed to do the delivery and I just never did the delivery.
We'll come to your state of health at this stage because it's relevant on your statement and your version to a later decision you made and its timing. Did you go and leave on the 15th of December 2016?
I stopped working on, yes, that's correct.
Right. Just one question before I ask
Yes.
the Chair to adjourn. Somewhere in the public domain, and I don't have the press article to hand, is an allegation that you stole money from the company. Could that allegation be related to the fate of this amount of 265,000 rand or not?
Chair, I was thinking about it during the lunch break. I have to see that allegation because if there is such an allegation, I'd like them to deal with it and bring it to me because it's the first time I've seen it. Secondly, it's very easy to say I stole money because, well, in theory, gee, everything you've seen here on the black book, I could have stolen. Not to say I paid it over to anybody. So it's easy now to turn around and say I've stolen. The question I have is if you're running a credible business, it's been now 2 years going that I'm not there. Why did you not report me in a criminal matter?
All right. Perhaps that detail will emerge in due course. The straightforward question I want to ask you in relation to this money, this amount of 265,000 rand, did you keep it or did you return it?
It was locked in my safe. Gavin Watson collected it.
Is this a convenient time? Chair, we're at page 98 and the statement concludes in about 7 or 8 pages. If there are any matters that delay completion tomorrow, may I suggest that we just sit till we finish tomorrow?
Yeah, no, I'm sure we'll finish tomorrow. I had reservations whether we would finish tomorrow, but seeing where we are now, I'm sure we will finish tomorrow with Mr. Agrizzi.
I will do my best to make sure it
Your
happens.
request is for tomorrow, not for today, yeah? Your
Tomorrow.
request for us to sit and finish.
Yes, tomorrow, Chair, because there's certain logistical
Yeah.
matters that need to be dealt with.
Okay. Should we not start earlier tomorrow?
Chair,
Well, let me
obviously I'm not
say,
entirely in control of proceedings, as
yes,
you know.
no. Well, let me not.
But we will finish.
Let
We'll
me
start at
let
10.
me not ask for your for your response now, but I am considering, and I would like to hear from the legal team. I am considering that we should possibly begin to start earlier than 10 o'clock. And maybe finish at 5 instead of 4. I am serious that we should try and, as far as possible, finish the hearing of evidence, oral evidence, at some stage this year in regard to the work of this commission. There may be challenges, but I would like us to try and do what we can. I know that sometimes we do need some time in the morning to deal with certain things, and I will take that into account. Reflect on that, and then we can talk in due course to see whether there would be any insurmountable challenges if we were to do that.
Chair,
So-
subject to one reservation, we have an application set down for 10 o'clock tomorrow. It shouldn't take very long.
Yes, no, what I've just said is more in general terms as opposed to tomorrow, but I would like, if possible, to start early tomorrow. If you say from the legal team, particularly from yourself, maybe 9:30, that would be fine. Then we could, if we are able to start with that application, and if the lawyers involved can be informed and they can make it earlier, then we do it. If not, we deal with it at some stage in the course of the morning. But if there are going to be difficulties, we stick to 10 o'clock and we start with that application. When we finish, we continue with Mr. Agrizzi. But in relation to just generally the times for starting and the times for finishing, please reflect on that and we can talk in due course. So what's your feeling as to whether 9:30 might be fine tomorrow? As I said, if it's going to be problematic, especially coming as late as it is coming now, then we can stay with 10 o'clock.
Chair, we will try and contact the legal representatives concerned
Might
to
be
start
problematic.
early tomorrow, 9:30. If that is not possible,
Okay.
then we start at 10.
Okay, all right.
But we will continue until the completion at least of this witness's evidence and try and line up a further witness.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
I'm leading that witness, so I'm not mad or madly keen on going till 5 on the 10th day of evidence. But
I'm sorry for, I think the noise of the aircon behind me is drowning your voice now.
well, perhaps that's just as well, Chair.
Okay,
Can
all
we
right.
adjourn tomorrow and we will notify you of the start time?
Well, shall we say we'll resume at 10 tomorrow? Because the lawyers know about 10 o'clock.
They do know about 10 o'clock,
Yeah,
Chair, and I
no.
understand one lawyer travels to get here, so perhaps we should just settle on 10. Perhaps we should just settle on 10 o'clock.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we are going to adjourn now. We will resume at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. We adjourn.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.